Hey everyone, welcome to part 3 of my South Africa trip. If you're wondering what the clueless white woman from the other tour group asked, it was this, and I quote, "Well, what was he guilty of?" Really? We were literally being lectured by a gentleman who was arrested and imprisoned at Robben Island, the same place where Nelson Mandela was imprisoned because he was fighting against apartheid. Are you really going to ask what a South African is guilty of when they were being oppressed by the white minority? Read up on the Sharpsville Massacre, which is one of the saddest and bloodiest days in South African history. There were a group of unarmed South Africans who were protesting the pass laws. Well, the apartheid regime thought it would be a good idea to begin shooting at unarmed South African men, women, and children. This child caught one of the stray bullets, and when the South African officers went around to local hospitals and places looking for people who had been shot, this kid, because he had been wounded, was thrown in prison. I yelled at this woman and said he did nothing. Nothing warranted a 12-year-old being thrown in prison with grown men. There was an awkward silence, and then our tour guide continued his lecture. During this trip, there were a number of questions that both were posed to me and that I posed to others. Now, some were lighthearted, and then some a bit more serious. So, for example, our tour group took a ferry out to Dasson Island, and we took pictures of what are called the jackass penguins. Now, why are they called jackass penguins? Well, because they bray like donkeys. That's the noise they make. We also were taken to a township where we met Miss Vicki, who, despite all of the poverty surrounding her, has managed to create a very successful bed and breakfast. So I asked Miss Vicki, well, how are you able to do this? And basically she said that the community looks out for her and she looks out for the community. She's very inspirational. Another place we went was the District 6 Museum. District 6 was a beautiful area of South Africa that was the epitome of how people from diverse backgrounds can get along and live in harmony. At the museum, I met a gentleman named Mr. Noor. His family had lived and worked and played in District 6 for generations. In fact, they had a business and they owned a building where their home was on the top level and their business was on the bottom. He was born there, as was his father and grandfather before him. Well, too much harmony and people of color getting along was a problem for the apartheid regime. So in 1966, they decided that they were just going to take over District 6 and declare it a whites area only. One of Mr. Noor's hobbies was training homing pigeons. Well, when his family was forced out, the apartheid regime bulldozed their building and home to the ground. Although he bought another home and took his homing pigeons with him and built a loft for them, he eventually let them go, fully expecting that not all of the pigeons would return. Well, none of them did. And because he had to drive by District 6 to go to work, he passed by his old home that had now been bulldozed to the ground. All 50 of his pigeons were standing on that plot of land. When he got out of his car to go over to them, they didn't fly away. They just looked up at him as if to ask, "Where is our home?" Mr. Noor asked, "How do you compensate me for this kind of loss?" And of course, I had no answer. It turns out that TC was not just our tour guide and driver. He was keeping a secret from our group. What do you think that secret was? Well, I'll reveal in the conclusion next week of my South Africa trip series.